All right. Okay, it looks like I like to kind of warm up a little bit and then also just check my connection and everything. So it looks like we're live, and that's great. And I see we've already got Ed says, I'm stoked to participate in this live stream. Is this the first one? No, this isn't. I've been doing this, I do this every month. I kind of do it for my Patreon subscribers. Basically what I do is I make it open to the public while it's live. That way, verify, right on, cool, thank you. That way, you know, pretty much anybody can join in. Also, it kind of hips people up to what I'm doing. And then once the live stream's finished, I put it unlisted back in YouTube so only my Patreon folks can rewatch it over and over if they so desire. So, you know, it's kind of a perk of being one of my Patreon subscribers. But I also like to offer this to my YouTube subscribers. So if people are logged on, they can hang out and hopefully interact and get some good stuff. Still connected to the MI. Yes, I am still connected to MI. As a matter of fact, I probably teach more hours for MI now than I ever have. Hey, Klaus. All right, we got everybody joining in here. Great to see everyone. I teach a couple days a week online for MI still. So I do some of their online courses. And then I've also, since I've recently moved to Nashville, Tennessee, there is a branch of MI here, but it's a guitar craft or guitar building school. And I've picked up a few hours there, giving some private lessons to those cats too. So yes, still very much in MI. I'm actually going 4 days a week for MI right now. So keeping me busy, that's for sure. And then I have some shows coming up. I'm playing first show down on Broadway today in Nashville. I've never played down there. It's kind of where all the hard partying goes on for tourists and stuff. So I'm looking forward to it. It's interesting because you know, you just kind of have to know a lot of different songs and be able to maybe have some charts and stuff. And it's just kind of call it out and let it rip kind of thing. So it'll be, you know, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. And then I have more of an original showcase with my buddy Mark McKay on November 1st, which is Tuesday. And that's at a place called Third and Lindsley, which is a really great venue out here. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, if you want to do private instruction with me, you can certainly, you know, just message me and we can work out the details, work out the schedule. Usually, unless you're here in Nashville, it would have to be over Zoom. And I do a lot of, not only do I do a lot of lessons for MI, but I do quite a few outside of MI, just people that have contacted me through various resources that want to get some lessons. So yeah, there's all kinds of good stuff to do there, man. So yeah, just reach out and we'll, you know, we'll get you on this schedule, so to speak, you know. Also, you might want to check out my Patreon. I mean, there's quite a bit of stuff on there. I have well over 100 videos on there now. And, you know, they do cross-pollinate. I do put some of my YouTube, you know, videos that I do to the public. That also ends up on my Patreon. That's where I put kind of the tabs or the diagrams or whatever. But also my Patreon has a lot of exclusive content too. So lots of good stuff. Yeah, if you wanted to, I usually ask, so Ed is asking, do you need to hear a demo? Yeah, I mean, I don't need to, but I prefer to. That way I can kind of hear, like, you know, where you're at and you're playing, what you're interested in, what style you're into, stuff like that. It's always good for me to hear a video. And, you know, like Klaus is one of my private students, and he has a YouTube channel. And every month, usually he sends me some videos that he's uploaded for me to check out of him playing over some different things that maybe we talked about in the lesson, and then I can kind of go back and also give him some pointers and, you know, see his progress. So if you don't have a YouTube channel, even if you don't like plan on putting videos out there for the public, it's great to be able to do that kind of stuff. Just, you know, upload stuff unlisted, and then you could share it with me and I could watch it that way too. So yeah, I really do appreciate that, although it's not a necessity. Okay. So yeah, let me know if you guys have any questions or thoughts as we go. I thought I wanted to talk about, you know, I've got this new kind of split screeny diagram thing here, so it really helps to be able to, whoops, I hit the wrong one. Split screen. There we go. It really helps to be able to visualize some things on the fretboard here, and I can really blow this up. So hopefully this helps. That way you're not squinting to see my fingers on the guitar. But what I thought I'd talk about a little bit today is some of the alternate harmony that you might have with some of your other scales, like for example a harmonic minor scale or a melodic minor scale. So, you know, if you're a beginner guitar player, this might go a little bit over your head, I don't know, but if you're an intermediate, or if you're looking for, maybe you've been playing for a while and you're looking for ways to kind of break out of that kind of standard sound, like especially if you've been playing for a while, this is kind of how I started getting into this years ago, is I just kind of got tired of the kind of typical major scale modes and stuff like that, and I started really studying other sounds and other scales. And what you'll notice that's in those scales, like the two scales in particular I'm thinking about, is the melodic minor scale and the harmonic minor scale. Yeah, all right, awesome. So Ed says it's helped. Great, great. Okay, so in those scales you have, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually pop this chat out so I can still see what you guys are saying, even when maybe I'm on another screen or something. That will help me. Let me do that real quick. So that way, when I jump over to another split screen or something, I can still see what you guys are into. All right, so, you know, anytime you're discovering a new scale, what you want to do is you want to harmonize it, because you want to realize what chords are in it, because it reveals a lot about how that scale could potentially function. Now, some of those scales, like harmonic minor or melodic minor, if you're a rock or blues player, you might say, well, those scales are kind of used mostly for jazz, aren't they? Or maybe Latin music, like kind of harmonic minor. And that's true, but there is alternate uses for some of this information. So, you know, if you know anything about me, I'm basically a rock player, blues rock. I dabble in jazz and stuff like that, but I would never consider myself a jazz, you know, straight ahead jazz player by any stretch. So, but I do like stealing from it and adding it into my, you know, rock and blues playing. So, but then you have to think about, well, how can I use it in that situation? So, like for example, the the minor major seventh chord. So if I was to harmonize, let's say, a melodic minor scale, like a D melodic minor scale, the first chord in it is going to be a minor triad chord with a major seven, because that's basically what a melodic minor scale is. It's kind of like a minor scale with a major seven in it, right? Or a Dorian mode with a major seven in it, which we'll talk about here in a second. So you want to know these chords, because once you know these chords, they can also lead you to the arpeggios. So you can see here, and I kind of like to put everything into the context of the cage system. So, you know, if we're in the key of D, for example, we have our C-shaped D chord here. This is just D major, right? And then we can also make it just minor. Now these are just triads. So there's my minor triad, and then if I add that C sharp note, which is the major seventh note of D, you get this really kind of interesting sound, right? So that's the first chord in the key of D melodic minor. So what that hopefully will lead you to, if I grab my little markers here, is you can start adding some notes to it, right? You're just really repeating some of the notes, like here's another root tone, here's another minor third, here's a perfect fifth, here's another major seven below, and there's your arpeggio of that, right? So I always suggest try to to just see the chord. Let me go ahead and make this the root again. And that way you see the chord, and that will lead you down the path of being able to see the arpeggio. So since I'm kind of using a pattern 1 shape here, could you play the Eddie Martin song? I don't know what that is, my man. Eddie Martin, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, Dominic, hey, thanks for joining in. I don't really do like song requests and stuff. This is kind of my educational guitar site that I like to do. And it's you know, it's kind of attached to my YouTube and my Patreon and everything and some other social medias. So I'm mostly talking about stuff like music theory and all kinds of stuff like that. So if you're more of just a fan that wants to hear some jamming or some tunes, well, I don't know that I'm going to do that, but I might play a little bit here in a minute just to give some examples of what some of this stuff sounds like. So hang in there. Okay, there's my minor major 7 chord from the C shape or pattern 1 using the cage system. Now in pattern 2, we've got just a typical D minor chord here. And right below this octave here, here's a D note, here's another D note. If I just lower that, there's my minor major 7 chord. And that's pattern number 2 because it's around the A shaped chord, right? And so once I can see that chord, I can start to infiltrate, excuse me, some of the other notes of the arpeggio here. So I can see the arpeggio around that thing. And the reason why I want to see that arpeggio is because I like to use just the arpeggio sometimes just to kind of get that major 7th note into my sound. Do you know what I mean? If that makes sense. Yes, there is augmented. Great point there, Ed. So you can see this in pattern 1 here, from the flat 3 to the 5th to the major 7. That's an augmented triad. So there is an augmented triad built in there. And I really like that sound because it's a sound that's not in the major scale. So here it is again. So in this pattern 2 shape, you can see that's from the 5th and the 7th and the 3rd, there's an augmented, right? Now, very underused. Yeah, so it has an interesting tension, and I'm going to just kind of give you some examples here in a sec, but I just kind of want to run over these shapes real quick. So now pattern 3 for your cage system minor is a little obscured. It's a little strange if you're not used to it. It's actually an inversion. So this would be your minor 7th. So your pinky is on the flat 7 for this minor 7th chord. So you just raise that up. Now you go, well, where's the augmented triad here? Well, it's actually a spread augmented triad. If you get rid of the root there, that's an augmented triad spread out across the string. So you can still hopefully see that augmented sound in there. Now this one is a little strange to try to make an arpeggio out of it. There's a couple different ways you could do it. You could put the major 7th note here. Now what I normally do is I put the 3rd there for the arpeggio, even though that's why pattern 3 is a little weird. And you could also put the major 7th there too if you want. So it's not my favorite fingering of the minor major 7th arpeggio, to be honest with you. But you know, the thing is with arpeggios, you know, it's always a kind of a dangerous term for a lot of players because you know, what the word arpeggio kind of conjures up in our brain is like, you know, super shredders like Yngwie Malmsteen and stuff like that. But, you know, using the arpeggio and just finding the notes of it and also just being able to phrase with it, you know, and mixing the notes up can sound interesting too. You don't have to play it with like insane, monstrous technique. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, like... So the thing is I like to try to see the arpeggios in different octaves. So like, for example, here, I might just focus on this top octave here, this little shape here for a little bit. Do you know what I mean? And then I might practice this little octave shape here too. So you don't have to play, I like to break arpeggios up into 2 octaves so I'm not kind of tied to this big monstrous shape that I feel obligated to play the whole thing. If you break it down into 2 octaves, then you'll get 2 smaller shapes, and that way you can Excuse me. That way you can, you know, kind of infiltrate it here and there and then jump out of it into something else. So, okay, so the next one would be our box number 4. This is kind of like everybody's favorite kind of pentatonic box, right? So, you know, your typical minor 7th chord would look something like that, right? Maybe like the E shape. That's why we call it pattern 4. So all we're doing is we're just raising that flatted 7th up, right? Yeah, so Eddie asked question, great. Would you use this for voice leading into an upcoming chord? Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the ways you could use this. But yes, because, you know, that major 7th note has a real natural pull back to the root, right? But, you know, you could also use this in like an altered sound because, you know, the melodic minor scale is also used for altered sounds, right? It's like an altered scale. So you can use it as a chord substitution. So for example, if I wanted to play D altered, like, you know, like one of these kind of chords, that would be like melodic minor up a half step. So I could play a minor major 7 up a half step. You know what I mean? That could actually be a D altered chord if you think about it. Because I got a D note here, I have the major 3rd, sharp 5, flat 9. You know what I mean? So I could play. So there, instead of playing the D7 chord, I played E flat minor major 7. Okay, it's an interesting tension. It might take your ear. So yeah, there is ways that this can lead to other chords, of course. So this would be our pattern 4 based off of the E chord shape. And again, I can infiltrate this with some of the arpeggio notes here too. There's that augmented triad all the way up, right? Here's augmented, here's an inversion of it, another inversion, augmented. It's really easy to see the augmented sound. I didn't say I'm not jazzy. I just said I'm not a jazzer. In other words, I don't you know, do gigs where I'm out there playing real book tunes and stuff like that. So I am a little jazzy at times, but you know what I mean? It's just me pulling from this information. Yeah, good comment though. That's the thing, is like, you know, listen, I've been playing the guitar since I was a kid, and it's like I said, you kind of get it after you've been playing for 20 years or 25 years, and you know kind of your Mixolydian sounds and your Dorian sounds, and that's great. But you know, maybe you hear somebody that tickles your ear. You know, maybe there's a kind of maybe a fusion player or something. For me, it was guys like Jimmy Herring and Mike Stern and those guys. When I heard those guys, it was like, oh, what are they doing? You know, yeah. Yeah. So here, yeah, we should, you know, it's that knowledge that allows you to step outside of those basic sounds. Now, you know, you've got to pick your battles. So here, let's go back to the chord, because, you know, if you're playing a country gig and you start laying down some minor major 7 licks, I'm not saying you can't. There are situations where you can. But, you know, it's going to sound a little wacky, and you might get some strange looks from your bandmates. But so, you know, you got to pick your battles. But this is more just me being kind of artistic and going, yeah, I just like this sound, and I'll figure out a way I can squeeze it in there, you know. So the last one is based off of the D-shaped chord. And normally you would play a minor 7, something like that. So again, minor major 7 is just that, right? And basically that's like if I was going to play an A minor chord here, it would be like this, right? Now I just move all those fingers up one string set. Now it's a minor major 7. And so again, you could also potentially see the arpeggio notes around here. And also that will probably reveal some of that augmented sound that we're talking about too. So yeah, so it's like the flat 3, the 5th, and the major 7th are what giving it that augmented sound from that arpeggio or those chord shapes, right? But you see this chord shape, that's augmented triad right there. So, you know, sometimes I'll just use that to get the sound. So Okay, so those are the shapes, right? So then the question is, well, how would you use those, right? So if you look at a melodic minor scale, you know, a lot of people will describe it as a major scale with a flat 3, and that certainly is true. It is a major scale with a flat 3, but you don't use it like as a major sound because the flat 3 is minor, right? And that's a pretty strong sound. So you don't really use it that way. So if you analyze the actual notes, you will see that it is awful darn close to a Dorian mode. So a Dorian mode is basically, you know, that minor sound with a major 6. So if I play D Dorian, it's like playing C major. It's the second mode of C, right? So I go, okay, if I look at my melodic minor scale, it's the exact same notes, but with a major 7. So I think of melodic minor as Dorian major 7, right? But, you know, it's not bluesy sounding, it's quirky sounding. So I like to kind of keep some of that blues in there. That's kind of your feel or your vibe or your mojo, right? But I can step out of that side of that sound a little bit by grabbing something from that D melodic minor scale, and that will give me kind of Dorian major 7. So that's like one of the arpeggios, right? So if I just fire up a, you know, kind of a staticky D Dorian backing track. So, you know, what I like to do is kind of So you see, like, I'm just thinking, oh, I want to play a little bluesy, but every now and then I can throw in that D minor major 7, which is now taken from the D melodic minor scale. So Ed has a question. What tells me that the track is in Dorian? Well, first of all, the easy answer is that I just typed in D Dorian backing track in YouTube, and they brought up some tracks for me. But how do you figure that out? Well, you know, Dorian is the second mode of the major scale. You know what I mean? So basically, you're just playing the 2 chord, right, which is D minor. And so if it's just a D minor chord, it's really not enough information to tell me if it's a Dorian mode or if it's an Aeolian mode or whatever. So I notice there's another chord in there. The other chord is like a G7 chord. So if you listen closely to this backing track, I'll just try to play the chords whenever it starts here. It's kind of like D minor to G7. Okay, so if you look at like what key has a D minor and a G7 in it, there's only one key, it's C, right? So that tells me that now I'm in the key of C, and when you play, you know, C major, the second mode is D Dorian. So sometimes you got to kind of look at the chord progression and deduce based off of that information. Now, if this chord progression went from D minor to G minor, that would change things, right? Because now I'm not in the key of C, because D Dorian is really C. Yeah, so the D minor doesn't necessarily give me the information. It's the G7 chord, right? Because really in any key, there's really only one dominant 7th chord. It's the 5 chord, right? So that G7 tells me, oh, that's a 5 chord, so this must be a 2 chord. And therefore I'm in Dorian, because Dorian is the second mode 2, right? So I'm really playing a 2-5 in the key of C. but I'm not actually ever playing a C major chord. So therefore now I'm kind of restructured my C major scale to evolve around that D minor chord, which gives me a D Dorian sound. Okay, so that's just a simple, basic explanation of that without getting into intervals or, you know, how the scale is spelled out. But now if you do that, you say, okay, well, what if I play that C major scale from D? What intervals does it give me? It gives me a 1, a major second, a flat 3, so it's a minor sound because of that flat 3. Then I get a natural 4, a natural 5, and a major 6, right? Major 6 against the D, and then a flat 7 is the C. So basically it's a minor scale with a major 6. That's what gives it that Dorian sound. And when you play a G7 chord, there's a B note in that G7 chord right there. So that tells me I'm in that Dorian sound. But see, melodic minors also has that same. The only difference between the melodic minor, instead of having a flat 7, has a major 7. So that's got a kind of interesting sound to it, you know what I mean? So. I'm just exclusively was playing D melodic minor there. So now that, you know, like I said, it's a little jazzy though, right? So if you, and to me, the structure, the physical way that you play the melodic minor scale, it's not super bluesy like a pentatonic or a minor blues, right? So I tend to play it a little bit different than I tend to play it a little bit more sterile, for lack of a better term. So, and that's okay. I can always swing back into some bluesy licks with my just D minor blues or whatever, right? Yeah, exactly. So, you know, like Ed's saying, a little bit of that color goes a long way. Absolutely, right? So, if you really think about it, what you're kind of doing there is you're almost implying, because of that major 7th note, that major 7th note would be like the 3rd of an A7 chord. So if you played an A dominant 7 chord, and that's the 5 chord of the D. So it kind of almost is acting like a little 5 chord sound, you know what I mean? But see, I don't necessarily like to play the scale a ton because it's a little sterile sounding. So what I like to do, yeah, the tension feels good. Once you get used to that major 7, it takes a little time of whittling around with it. But once you get used to that major 7th note, it starts to sound really sweet. So, but you know, I don't really necessarily want to play, you know, I don't want to play that whole scale all the time. So I like to just take, you know, just take little pieces of it, and that's where that minor major 7th arpeggio comes in. Even just the augmented, like that augmented sound. That's why I was saying it's really good when you do work on these arpeggios to break them into 2-octave shapes, because then you're not like a slave to this big 6-string or 5-string shape. You can just play a little piece of it into your lines and then get back into something kind of bluesy. You know what I mean? I just only played it, I just hinted at it there and then just got back into something bluesy. So, and you can gauge that, right? You can go, oh, I just want to do a tiny bit of it. Maybe you're on a rock gig and you just want to do it a little tiny bit just to kind of make your audience's ears perk up just a little bit. But then if you're on a more like, you know, avant-garde type gig, you can stay there longer if you so desire. You know what I mean? So you have the kind of ability to choose that, you know. All right, thanks for all the define elements of harmonics. Yes, really, you know, once you start to understand the relationship of that major 7, sometimes I'll just add that note and that'll be it. I might play some. Just that note, just add that into my kind of minor pentatonic. So yeah, you really starts to kind of get that sound. All right, so that's cool, right? So learn those chords, and then you can learn the arpeggios around them, and then you'll start to get that sound. And you know what you want to do is just contrast it against your minor blues scale, so you can kind of, you know, throw it in there, so to speak. Now, let me know if you have any thoughts or questions on that. I'm just going to kind of continue on, but I'm happy to answer. Breakthrough material, great, man. That's great. This is what it's all about, right? I always try to, you know, hopefully describe things in a way that is not too complicated. You know what I mean? The second mode of melodic minor also has a flat 3 and the 6 in it too. Yes. Okay, that's a great question. Now, so Klaus is asking here in the chat, the second mode of melodic minor. Okay, so the second mode of melodic minor is Dorian flat 2. So let's say, for example, if I played this track right here, D Dorian, and I played C melodic minor over it, right? Okay, so that's the thing, is you want to go, okay, yeah, that's theoretically that is correct, yeah. But that flat 2 is a pretty dramatic note. So, you know, you definitely, if you want to try to, you know, strategically get that into your playing, you probably want to explore that a bit and get used to that sound, because it's a pretty abrupt sound, right? So now the same thing would apply. If you do want to use that scale, there is a hipness to it. You just have to, it's got, you know, it's a little abrasive. So you want to explore it and learn some phrases and stuff with it. But now you're in C melodic minor, right? If you're going to play Dorian flat 2, you're going to be playing, the parent scale is C melodic. So what do you have? You have C minor major 7 now. Do you know what I mean? So maybe you want to try that over the top of it. So here's a... Woo, that's got some edge to it, you know. It's up to you. You know, you might think that sounds cool, or you might write a song where it works great. Fantastic. I'm all about it. I personally don't use it a ton, just because it's a little too far out there for me in this circumstance. As a replacement for just regular Dorian, might be other uses for it, but that's a good observation. Absolutely. So if you wanted to go for that mode, you want to go for that Dorian flat 2 sound, then you could play a minor major 7 down a whole step. And this is what I like to do, is I like to just create little mental shortcuts. So, you know, in this case, we're kind of playing, if we're playing just melodic minor from the root, then it's just a minor major 7 from the root, right? Okay, so there's another Dorian sound, and I've been talking, Klaus is one of my private students, so he'll be hip to this, but there's another Dorian sound that is part of the harmonic minor scale. So this is called Dorian sharp 4. So Dorian sharp 4, D Dorian sharp 4, would be like playing a harmonic minor, right, over a D minor sound, right? So technically it's not going to work over this backing track, because that would have a G sharp in it, but you can still make it work. You know, there's no rules here. So there I'm playing a little bit of a harmonic minor. Playing so far out just feels too concocted to me. Yeah, well, that's the thing, is it can sound a little contrived. That's what I mean. So I like to think of what is natural for me as a player, which is kind of going to that blues rock sound. So I always kind of gravitate towards that, and I always kind of come back to it, even if I go a little bit outside with a different sound. Do you know what I mean? That's what kind of makes everything make sense to me. So I don't live in these sounds. I just kind of connect them to my minor blues, And the thing there is just to try to get, yeah, little passing tones and stuff like that too. Yeah, exactly. So with the Dorian sharp 4 mode, excuse me, that's really the parent scale. If I'm playing it in D, is A harmonic minor. And well, A harmonic minor has the first chord is A minor major 7. So now I can regurgitate those minor major 7 arpeggios from the 5th. So I can play it from the root, and that would give me a melodic minor sound. I could play it from the 5th of that D minor, and that would give me a Dorian sharp 4. So here's an A minor major 7. So it's a little quirky sounding, and it takes your ear a little bit of time to get used to it. So, you know, you can play just A minor, because that's part of C, so that's part of D Dorian, right? So that's one of those situations where, again, I'm just going to use it sparingly and kind of get back into maybe some D blues or something like that. So that's another way that I like to use those same fingerings, minor major 7 sounds, right? There it is right there. Try to see it in your boxes. So like right here I have D minor. So right there's that A minor major 7, and I can kind of infiltrate it, right? And I'm demonstrating, so I'm playing a little sterile than probably I normally would, but that's just to kind of give you some, give your ear a little taste of what that might sound like. So it says here, do you decide today I'll write a tune in Dorian sharp 4? No, I really don't decide anything like that. You could for sure, then you're in that harmonic minor sound. But what I'm saying is I use this in more common sounds, like, Dorian is a very common sound out there when you're playing gigs and stuff like that, right? A lot of blues is in Dorian, a lot of funky stuff is in Dorian, like Carlos Santana-y kind of stuff is in Dorian. Even Pink Floyd played a lot of stuff in Dorian, so it's a real common sound. So these are just methods to just kind of get outside of that sound a little bit, and you can explore it a little bit, and then you can judge how long you want to stay there. That's entirely up to you. Do you know what I mean? So that's another way you can use those minor major 7s. So I have from the root, which would give me kind of Dorian major 7 sound, and then also from the 5th, which gives me a Dorian sharp 4 sound, right? And there's other things you can use there, by the way. I just don't want to go too crazy. But all right, let's look back at our chords here. Seems Dorian really welcomes hook playing. I'm not sure what you mean by hook playing, but yeah, I might agree with that. Maybe you can describe to me what you mean by hook playing. But I'm going to jump over to another screen here now. And I'm still just doing this in the key of D, and this is just because D kind of fits great across the guitar neck as you do it. So now what these are major 7 sharp 5 chords. A major 7 sharp 5 would be a 3 chord in the key. If you're looking at a D melodic minor scale, that would be the 3rd chord in D melodic minor. So I'm going to just look at it from D as the root here, but then we'll kind of transpose it. So basically, if you look at, here's your typical major 7 chord from a C shape, right? So there's your major 7. It's like a D major 7 from the C shape. So all we're doing is we're raising that 5th up, and sometimes this program will default to flat 6 because it is enharmonically a flat 6, but within the context of our scale, it's a sharp 5. So this would be a major 7 sharp 5 chord, and of course once you see that, well, that would actually be that, right? You could add some of the notes to make it an arpeggio. And there would be your pattern 1. And this also is very augmented sounding. You can see that augmented triad in there, right? There's some augmented stuff going on here. So this is not my favorite arpeggio to play. It's got some kind of big stretches in it. Maybe if you're playing it up the neck a little bit, it's a little bit easier to finger. This particular shape is not my favorite to play, but you know, it's there and available to you. So let me go back to just the chord again here. There's the chord, right? And actually you can, you know, I'm kind of being redundant. It's kind of, that's really the 4-note chord you need right there. It has an interesting sound. You know, you might hear it in songs that kind of go. Kind of sharp 5-y kind of sound. Here's pattern number 2. This will be around the A shape. So technically you would probably normally play your 5 here for a D major 7. All right, but then if you sharp the 5. Now just as a side note, you can see here in pattern 1, it's really obvious in pattern 1 that if you took the root away and you just played these 3 notes, that would be an F sharp major triad. Right? So it's kind of like an F sharp major with a D in the bass. And the same thing here. This is an F sharp major triad. This is a first inversion with a D in the bass. Does that make sense? Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, play a hook. Right. Okay. Yeah. So, you know, you play a phrase and then you can repeat that phrase, but then change to one of these kind of more tensiony notes or something like that. You know what I mean? Like. Or, yeah, play a little, you know, a phrase or a hook as you're describing it. Yeah, and then, you know, tweak it a little bit to introduce one of these newer notes, and yeah, you'll get some excitement out of that. That's a great way to use it because you still got like a theme going on, some kind of rhythmic theme or something like that, and that always works well, right? So, you know, you think of these chords that you look at them maybe for the first time, you go, wow, dude, these are pretty complicated. But if you can break them down simply, like for example, if I can recognize that that's just an F sharp major triad chord there, right? There's an F sharp major arpeggio, right? So all I got to do is add in those D notes, and there's my major 7 sharp 5. You know what I mean? So that's a really good way to kind of simplify what this chord is under your fingers. It's, if you can see that, you know, that F sharp major sound there. Okay, so pattern 3, again, pattern 3 is always a little weird in the cage system. This is how I see this material is a use at my level. Yeah, you know, the thing is, you know, there's no rules here. This is just kind of like how I use it, but you might find other cool ways to use this, of course. So this pattern here is basically based off of a major 7 from the pattern 3 of the cage system. So it's really an inversion. It's from the 5th, so it's a second inversion. And then if you sharp the 5, which happens to be the lowest note here, right? So if you sharp that, that gives you your major 7 sharp 5. And you might say, well, where's that F sharp major triad here? Well, it's a spread triad. So it's these 3 notes right here. It's the sharp 5, the 3rd, and that would be the root right there. So it would be this. There's your F sharp major triad. And then you add that D note. Right? So this arpeggio is a little bit, you know, can be a little tricky to play. You could, I'll show you, you know, kind of a way to finger this that might be a little more forgiving, maybe. You could put the major third here, so you could play these 3 notes. Sorry. Not there, I'm sorry, I got the wrong note here. There we go. So you can put the major 7th tone here, so you got this little augmented in the major 7th, and then you can jump up to the top part of this arpeggio, and you could put the sharp 5 here. Now it's, you know, my program says flat 6, but we'll say sharp 5. And then there's another root tone there. So it's a little odd fingering for this particular one. I suppose another way you could potentially do it is if you were to add the major 7th here and put the sharp 5 there. So you might want to experiment with what works best for you. I tend to put the major 7th here because it just kind of falls under my fingers a little bit easier. So that's, again, you know, you got to pick your battles. That's not my favorite shape. But, you know, if you, like I said, if you break it into 2 octave shapes, then you've got little pieces that you might be easier. You're not a slave to that huge shape, you know what I mean? Yeah, so, you know, this, everybody's got to kind of meddle with this a little bit and see where this might help them. So here's pattern 4. So here would be a D major 7th chord, and then the top note of that is the 5th. So you just raise that up, and you get that, right? So if you can notice, that's an F sharp major triad right there, with the D in the bass. So seeing that can kind of help you suss out maybe the arpeggio that would go around that, right? So I might play this arpeggio something like this. This is kind of how, you know, that's kind of how I like to finger this particular arpeggio here. And of course, that flat 6 should be a sharp 5. All right, and I'm getting a little low on time, so I'm going to kind of blast through these. And then you have your pattern 5. So this would be your typical major 7th chord here in this shape, and then of course we're just going to raise the 5 up. Now this one is actually tricky to play in context, so you might want to just, now you see right there is an F sharp major triad, right? So you know, it's a little tricky, so you might want to just kind of learn little pieces of that. All right, so now how could I use this back, if I go back to my Dorian backing track, how could I use these shapes? Well, I would think, you know, I was doing it just from a D root, but actually it would be from F, because F is the 3rd chord in D melodic minor, right? So if I played F minor, F major 7 sharp 5. Okay, and then if I was thinking Dorian sharp 4, which is A harmonic minor, that has a C major 7 sharp 5 in it. So I could copy and paste that over. And you know, another strategy that I use is, like I said, I try to break them down into smaller pieces, but I also try to infiltrate it with some different scale tones and stuff too, so it softens the arpeggio up just a little bit, and it doesn't sound like I'm always playing arpeggios all the time. Which I'm using arpeggios a lot as a way to see structures and stuff, but I also like to see some of the notes around it, the scale patterns around it. So that's kind of a little introduction. Of course, if you're digging what's going down here, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and you know, I would always certainly appreciate any support on the old Patreon channel. You know, I'm going to put those, for example, I'm going to put those diagrams. You'll get those from signing up for the Patreon, even just the basic tier. But there's also, you know, other tiers there that have more involved information. And for you guys that are already part of the Patreon, you know, I can go back into my YouTube channel, in the videos that are unlisted in my YouTube channel. Did Anunnaki use these elements? Yes, some, yes. So the Sons of Anunnaki tune, if that's what you're talking about, that I did a few years back, was really an experiment in harmony for me. You know what I mean? And almost a demonstration in some of these different harmonies that was going on there. So I am using quite a bit of this stuff in that tune. Each section kind of goes into a little bit of a different sound, you know what I mean? For example, you know, it's in this. It's in like a Phrygian dominant sound. So that's playing E harmonic minor over B, right? But then the second chord, when it goes to the B section, what I do is I go to a C9 chord. It's like that's the melody. So there I'm thinking G melodic minor. And that has G minor major 7 in it. And that's kind of where that melody is kind of coming from. So then what I do is I go to the tritone of that, which is F sharp. So it goes. What's it? Something like that. I haven't played that song for a long time, but yeah, there's elements of that all over the place in there. You know what I mean? And so that's a great kind of demonstration of how I approach some of this stuff. So yeah, great. Yeah, it's kind of a complete rainbow of modal playing. It really is. But I'm using a lot of these alternate modes as opposed to just playing the major scale modes. I'm using a lot of harmonic minor and melodic minor, some diminished scale stuff in there, and even some augmented-y kind of whole tony stuff. It was it was almost a tune that I did just to kind of demonstrate all these different sounds a little bit. And so yeah, it's cool that you're recognizing some of that stuff in there. So it might have been a little bit too much of a good thing, I don't know, but really that's kind of what was the catalyst for that particular song. So if you haven't heard that song, go check it out. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's got all these sounds baked into it in the different sections of that song, you know, these alternate modes and stuff. Yeah. Awesome. All right, so we got about 8 minutes here, then I got to jump off and I got to get on to another lesson. So if anybody has any questions or thoughts, go ahead and throw them at me, and maybe, you know, if you want to demonstrate. Now, if you want to go just a little bit further down the wormhole with these minor major 7s, you can also think of altered sounds, right? Because the altered scale is really the melodic minor up a half step, right? So if you have a situation, so let's say I have a 5-to-1 kind of move. So sometimes I'll just practice that over and over. So if I'll type in like C minor to G7 backing track, and you can get these 5-to-1 back and forth, and you can practice some of these sounds. So G altered is really A flat melodic minor, right? So if I play this track, you'll hear it. There's C minor, there's G altered, right? So like right there over the G7 chord, I played an A flat minor major 7, so it's minor major 7 up a half step. Same, you're regurgitating those same fingerings, right? play C minor major 7 too. Right? And then for the major 7 sharp 5, I could play that from B. So I could play that from the major third of the G. That B major 7 sharp 5. And I could also play that from E flat from the C harmonic minor scale, right? Let me try it again. So you see, there's lots of uses for these things too, you know what I mean? I don't, man, you know, I used to play a lot of acoustic when I was a kid. That's kind of what I started out on. And then I don't play it as much anymore. I just really love the electric guitar. You know, I love the sound of it, and I love messing around with it. And I love the way it plays and bending and stuff like that. I'm getting ready to do some Alan Parsons dates next week. So I'm running some songs. So I was learning this. Let's see. So, you know, I started out when I was a kid playing fingerstyle like that. And that's what kind of led me to more of a hybrid style of playing on the electric guitar. And you can see on these two fingers, maybe you can see it, I don't know. But I actually wear acrylic nails on those. I have to go every couple of weeks to the beauty salon and get some new nails put on. So I do play a little bit of acoustic, although usually when I'm at home playing and practicing, I'm usually got my hands on electric guitar. So yeah, you know what I mean. But I've got probably about five acoustic guitars kicking around somewhere. You know, the problem is I don't really love any of them. They're all pretty good. Like I've got a Taylor, I've got that Godin, which actually that one sounds great, but it's not very good as an acoustic. It sounds good plugged in. And then I've got this Eastman, which is a great sounding guitar. It needs to be set up a little bit. It's a little hard to play right now. And then I've got like this Ibanez acoustic that my dad kind of just gave me one day. And I got my dad's old 1965 or 66 Gibson that really, I'll never really play it other than it's just nostalgic. So I do have quite a few acoustics, and I used to play acoustic a lot. I used to play a lot of nylon string too. But yeah, as I've gotten older, I just kind of, I kind of getting into that kind of blues rock and fusion and stuff like that. It's just, I've had my fingers on that electric guitar a lot. So yeah. Okay, sorry to digress. So we'll go back a second. Yes, I see the latitude we can develop from using the major 7. Yeah, so the 5 chord in this chord progression, which is G7, is a functioning 5 chord. So there's a couple different scales I could play over that. I could play Phrygian dominant, which G Phrygian dominant, which would be C harmonic minor. So C harmonic minor, the first chord in that is C minor major 7, and then the third chord in that is E flat major 7 sharp 5. So I can use those shapes again. Or over the G altered chord, I could use the G altered scale, which would be melodic minor up a half step, A flat melodic minor. So there I could also use A flat minor major 7, and then the 3 chord in that scale would be technically C flat major 7 sharp 5, but it's just from a B note. So I think of it as the major third of the G, because I want to see how it skews against the G. So I start to make these little rules up. I can play I can play a minor major 7 up a half step from G, and I can play a minor major 7 from the 4th of G, which would be C, and then A flat. So those are the two places I can play the minor major 7 and get those two different sounds. And then I can also play it from the major 3rd of the G, which would be B or C flat technically, and that would be coming from the altered scale. And then I can also play the minor major 7 sharp 5 from the E flat, which would be the flat 6 of the G chord, so to speak. So I always try to skew it against that G chord. Do you know what I mean? So because that's where you're using it against, and then just plant little flags so you, and then practice it. You know what I mean? So does that make sense? Yeah, acoustic definitely takes everything to a different place. So, all right, gang. Listen, Ed, great to see you here. Klaus, also, I don't know if you're still on, but great to see everybody here. Thanks for popping in the chat and getting involved. And thanks again for the support. I actually have a private lesson with one of my Patreon students right now. So I got to jump off. And, you know, like I said, please like and share and subscribe. I'm going to leave this up for a little bit, and then eventually I'll make it exclusive to my Patreon folks. So quite a bit of information in this one. So I hope you dug it, and look for the next one next month, right? I usually do it like the last weekend of every month. So keep your eyes out. All right, good to see everybody. Oh, where can I hear this material more? In your original song list. I've used this a lot in some of my other tunes. I have an instrumental record I put out years ago, but it still uses some of this stuff. It's called Eucalyptus. It's on Spotify, so you can just definitely check that out. All right, we'll see you guys. Cheers. I gotta bounce.